We have breaking news to share in today's video, which is really about the fact that a third bank has now sadly officially announced that it is collapsing, and even more specifically now being taken over. It is not on the verge of being taken over, it is being taken over, and it's now officially been announced that it's really going to be happening now. It started with Silicon Valley Bank, as most of you guys know, in the last 2 months or so. It started with Silicon Valley Bank, then it went on to Signature Bank, and now as of just less than 1 week ago, or specifically just a couple days ago if you're watching this on release day, it is happening to First Republic Bank. So in today's video, what I really want to talk about is really to describe the situation of what's happening over there. I want to talk about just the bank collapse situation in general, because this is definitely breaking news. It's important to understand this because at the end of the day, we have our money in banks as well. So, there's a personal side to it as well. And I want to give some personal insights to what this really means for us. So even if you've seen another video about it, hopefully this video can give you a brand new other perspective about this, and also to give some personal insights as well. So there's something original to take away from this video. So with that being said, let's just get this video started. But as always, if you guys enjoy videos like this, remember to smash the like button, consider subscribing, hitting the bell. If you guys want videos similar to this, feel free to leave a comment, any thoughts, personal opinions, questions about honestly anything. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for your support, and let's get this video rolling and started. So we're going to start by giving a little bit of a background information about First Republic Bank and describe the situation to what's happening. I did make another video already that talks a lot about Silicon Valley Bank, so I highly recommend checking that video out. It's going to be at the very, very end screen. I believe it's literally just called It's Over or Bank Collapse. It's also called Bank Collapse because it talks about another bank collapse. So highly recommend checking that video out. But back to talking about First Republic Bank. First Republic Bank was essentially a bank that was around the United States that controlled approximately around $229 billion worth of assets, beating even Silicon Valley Bank, which for perspective controlled about $209 billion at the time that it closed, now becoming the second largest bank collapse in American history, right after Washington Mutual. So in other words, the top 3 bank collapse stories that we have right now, this has now set a brand new record where it's starts with number one, Washington Mutual Bank, and number 2, First Republic Bank, which is the bank that just again collapsed and is now number 2, and then Silicon Valley Bank, and then all of the other banks. The situation really what's going on is that First Republic Bank lost about 40% of its deposits, largely due to the interest rate situation, and specifically really just people removing their money from their bank into safer assets. You have to keep in mind is that many banks have to have money circulating in order to stay in operation and continue running. But if every single person, one of their clients, their people, their customers, all of them start to take their money out of the banks, then we run into a lot of trouble. And that's really the situation and story to what's happening right now. About 70% of the money that was inside of First Republic Bank actually ended up going uninsured. What this really means is that it just simply means is that because the FDIC, it covers about $250,000 insured and guaranteed limits of money for people and their customers. In other words, if you have your money inside of First Republic Bank, they will protect up to $250,000 worth of it. However, about 70%, like just mentioned, of the amount of money that they have are from people with accounts greater than $250,000. So it means that the average bank of similar size, just for perspective, typically has about 55% of their bank money uninsured, but First Republic Bank had about 70% of their money uninsured. So that is a pretty big difference, and just something to really get noted about, to really have some perspective to compare. Additionally, because of everything that's been happening right now, it's not even just that the bank itself is collapsing, but even its actual stock, to no surprise, is also collapsing as well. So if you are someone that invests in the stock market, especially if you are following bank stocks in general, just note to be very careful, not just if you own First Republic Bank stock, but if you own just any banking stock in general, because a lot of them are on a very shaky edge right now. First Republic Bank stock went from about $160 $171 collapsing. So it's not just the bank itself that's collapsing, but even their stock that's now collapsing all the way down from their 1-year high of $171 to now being worth, let's just say, something in the single digits, we'll just put it that way, down basically over 98%. Basically, it's become worth almost nothing in perspective to where it really started back just about 1 year ago. So it's a very, very massive thing to really keep note of. And again, this extends not just to First Republic Bank, because while it is true that this is the bank that actually did collapse, it's important now to be very protective if you own any bank stocks in general, because this could potentially be a domino effect to a lot of the other stocks, which is other banking stocks, which is what we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But the story is that in order to try to save themselves from everything that's been happening, or in order to deal with everything that's been happening, what they had to do is that they essentially had to put their bank up for auction and have like a little bit of a bid where all of the other banks, the larger banks, can sort of bid on trying to take over First Republic Bank, because they need to have someone to kind of either bail them out or to take over everything that they own in their operations, so that they can basically stay functional and, you know, have somewhere to physically go, you know, because it's a business at the end of the day, because, you know, that's just how the banking world works. So what happened is that of all of the banks that ended up bidding for it, congratulations to JP Morgan and Chase, because they are the bank that officially won the bid and will now be taking over First Republic Bank. So all this really means is that if you are someone that banks with First Republic Bank, or if you just know of a First Republic Bank maybe in your neighborhood, I believe that its 84 branches across 8 states is now going to be renamed as JP Morgan and Chase. In other words, it's going to become a part of JP Morgan and Chase Bank right now going forward. And I don't bank with First Republic Bank, but I do bank with Chase Bank, interestingly. So I do know that it's definitely going to be impacting a lot of people, because there's a lot of people I know that do bank with Chase Bank. Now, in terms of what does this actually mean for us and the significance about this is that the most important thing really to notice is that now that we have 3 banks, very massively large banks, that have now collapsed in the last 2 months and are setting new record highs not every single day, but certainly every single couple of weeks now, because that's literally been the frequency that we've been seeing these banks collapse. It's really, really important to be protective of all of the money that you currently have inside of your bank account. I would definitely say is that this might be time to move your money from, you know, more riskier assets into safer assets, which is ironically, this is one of the reasons why this is happening in general. It's because of all of the asset related stuff, you know, people moving their money into, you know, safer places as well. But it's important as well, and that's what we all have to really worry about and try to deal with during times like these. The biggest fear is that because now that we have several banks that have now officially collapsed, is that this is going to potentially become a domino effect for a lot of the other banks to collapse. The big idea right now, and the big overall belief inside of our banking system, is that a lot of the very large banks are going to be doing just fine. So for example, JP Morgan and Chase, Wells Fargo, your Bank of America, those will probably do just fine and be okay. But it's a lot of the other smaller banks that are now in massive danger of closing down as well. Certainly the credit unions, but even just any kind of very niche related bank, because there are banks that are catered to just teachers, there are banks that are catered to people in a particular town, people in a particular industry, people in a particular something, and these are the banks that are in a lot of danger right now of closing down. And the fear is that because we are already seeing several very big name banks, again, we're talking about $200 billion worth of assets. So these are not small banks, they're just smaller banks than the mega banks that we typically, you know, most of us know about, such as like JP Morgan, Chase, Discover, all those banks. That the biggest fear is that if this becomes a domino effect for a lot of the other banks, is that we have to be very, very on guard before it actually physically happens. And I think that's probably one of the most important takeaways from everything that's mentioned in today's video, on top of just a lot of the other things that have been mentioned. Because otherwise, there is definitely the risk that if this starts to happen to a lot of the other banks, if we start to see people start to try to withdraw their money all of a sudden, and we're not, you know, the last one to be able to, or if we end up being the last one to have that happen, we could be putting ourselves in a very dangerous situation. And that's definitely something I don't think most people would ever want to be in. They want to be very protected with their money. And I think that's the biggest thing. So what this really means for us is really to just make sure you really diversify the money that you're currently in. I do think that the bright and sad bright and sad news is that you also have to keep in mind that in most banks, it's FDIC insured up to $250,000 or $250,000. It's sad because most of us do not have $250,000, but at the same time, the bright news is that because of that reason, it also means that most of us should actually feel pretty safe, more or less. It's just important to be aware of what's happening before, it's like the saying, better safe than sorry. It's better to be just cautious and aware of the situation than to have something potentially pop up later on. But the good news is, I would say that for most of us, we should be relatively safe. What we do want to do maybe is just to protect and make sure that we're, investing very, very wisely, because at the end, this is not just going into banks in general, but also the actual stocks, the actual investments, the actual companies that bank with these particular banks. Because again, it's not just regular people like us that have banks as well, but we have companies that rely on these banks for money, especially Silicon Valley Bank. We already know the situation because many of the people that bank with Silicon Valley Bank also happen to be like businesses, businesses with well more than the $250,000. And First Republic Bank is no particularly different in that world as well. But for most of us, I think the great news is that we should be relatively safe, but it's still important to just be aware. And that's the most important thing. So with that being said, that's pretty much what I really wanted to share in today's video. So if you guys found that relatively insightful, thank you guys so much for watching to the end. Remember to smash the like button, consider subscribing, hitting the bell. Feel free to leave a comment with any questions, thoughts about anything. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay well, stay banking, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.